Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ikigaia podcast. Today I am joined by the wonderful and inspiring Alexander Inchbold. He is the founder of the Purpose Movement, and he also is an extreme artist and a creativity mentor. So Alex and I have known each other for a while now, and he really is the picture of someone who I see as just the perfect fit to be talking to on the Ikigaia podcast because of all of his focus and passion around purpose. So, Alex, welcome, and thank you for making some time to talk to me today.
Oh, Kathleen, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. It's really wonderful to be here. Thank you.
I would love for you to introduce yourself to everyone and just let them know who you are and what you do.
Well, you gave a pretty good introduction already. So, first of all, perhaps I'll tell you where I am, because you might have noticed this is a lake. This is Lake Geneva, and I'm actually sitting here in Switzerland right now. Over there are the French Alps. Back here is Zermatt, Verbier, Mont Blanc's that way, and Geneva's kind of that way. So that's where I'm located. Oh, and by the way, over the mountains is Italy. And we moved here last year. And I absolutely love this place. We moved here because I love living here. And then we created, like, my business has been running for a while. And what I help people to do is, wherever they are in the world, I help them to love what they do, love who they do it with, love where they live, and then help others to love what they do as well. So, like, my life is pretty extraordinary. I get up in the morning and I check my calendar, like so many of us, and calendar today, and every single thing that I have to do on my calendar today, I love. And I don't take that for granted. I mean, I think that is I'm so fortunate, and I'm so grateful that I get to do that. And that's my wish for everyone. You know, I wake up next to a woman I absolutely love, my partner, my soulmate, and I get to do that. And my view is that if everyone in the world did that, if everyone loved what they didn't do it for the money, or because, like, their partner told them to, or because they thought their parents suggested they ought to do that, but they genuinely did it because they love what they do. Actually, all of the problems we face in the world would disappear. Like, everything would disappear. And like, just over here, we're supposed to have snow. Right? So that, you know, these mountains are what, 3,000 meters, almost 10,000 feet if you're in North America or in the UK. And like this time of year, end of September, you could get snow up there. But certainly in a couple of weeks, you should have snow up there. And I get to see it on a daily basis. Is the snow, isn't the snow? And, like, it's so clear to me, climate change is not a theory. It's like, I get to see it. And my view is that if everyone loved what they did, and I can talk you through the logic of this, is everyone loved what they did, things like climate change and inequality would just disappear.
I would love to settle on that point for a moment, because I know for sure there are people listening going, what are you talking about? How are you getting rid of inequality just by people loving what they do? And I know that you do, I'm sure, have a explanation for that. So I'd love to dive into that before we go any further.
Okay, well, I'm happy to do that. So, if you think about, like, most of us who work in a job, even those of us who actually have created our own job, actually there are elements of our job which we don't like. Now, if you don't like your job, whether you work for somebody else or you work for yourself, and even if you don't have a job at the moment, then what ends up happening is that has an impact on your mind. And that state of mind can eventually lead to depression. Look at what's happened after COVID, like the lockdown. Mental health has gone, and cases of depression have gone through the roof. Now, I'm not talking about, like, hardcore depression, but people having doubts, doubting themselves. So depression for me is a spectrum, like autism, it's a spectrum. And you can be anywhere on that spectrum. And if you are not feeling great about the day, that depression, if you allow it to continue, ultimately, epigenetics, it starts to impact First of all, it impacts your neural network, right? So you form neural networks in your brain, which basically keep the cycle going of doubt and worry. If you continue that, that starts to impact your genes. Right? When you and I grew up, we were told that your DNA was fixed. At least I was. I'm a little bit older than you, but maybe you were as well. Actually, our genes are not fixed. According to epigenetics, they're dynamic. So in fact, you only ever express 5% of your genes. Now, if you get depressed, like even slightly, that will start to impact your mental state. If you create neural networks in your brain, you associate that with negative emotions, it will start then to impact your genes. If it starts to impact your genes, you'll start to believe it's not possible. If you start to believe it's not possible, that's going to lead to more depression. If it leads to more depression, then that's going to start to come out in the form of divorce or not having relationships or eventually disease. Like it gets into the cells and eventually starts to manifest as disease. And I'm not talking like high level disease. I've worked with the health system and World Health Organization and UN around health for like 15 years, or I did in the past life. I still work with health professionals. What I really mean is it starts to aggravate, it starts to settle, and eventually you leave it and it drifts this way. Now that then creates a vicious cycle where you go down and down and down. So it starts to impact everything from, your diet accelerates it, your sleep gets worse. We have sleep deprivation, depression, disease. And then that, of course, leads to addiction because you're trying to find ways to escape from this reality you've created. And the addiction can be something as simple as social media or sugar. Like those, I'm not talking about alcohol, I'm not talking about drugs, but then that takes you out of this space of being in love with what you do. What's the implication of that? Then any decision you make will come from a thought. We are not a body with a spirit. We're a spirit with a body. We're not body with energy. We're energy with body. The quantum world drives the physical world. You think it's the other way around because our senses give us that perception. No, it's not. It's the other way around. So if our energy is low, guess what? We're going to start manifesting things in our world which are not aligned with who we are. So the consequence of that, of course, is we end up with things like inequality and climate change because our energy starts to drive our inner game. The essence of who we are starts to drive what goes on in the outside world. You don't, like it's not that the world outside impacts you, although it does. The world inside you creates the world outside you. And like that's a concept that a lot of people talk about without fully understanding what it is. I got to see it painting in extreme locations. I got to experience it again and again and again and again and again. And I can talk a little bit about that if that's of interest. But the salient point is that the inner drives the outer. And if you are imbalanced within yourself, so you're more focused on the outer rather than the inner, what ends up happening is in your world at your level, all of these things start to manifest little things and they grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. But then at the global level, if all of us are doing that, that then leads to an imbalance, that leads to inequality, that leads to climate change. So the inner impacts the outer, as the saying goes, Rumi once said, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop. And if that is true, anything you do, any thought will impact the entire ocean. And I know you've heard that quote before because I know you've heard somebody else refer to
it. That is a very salient quote. And your I think that what you've just pointed to, the individual experience as part of a collective, is something that so often it's easy to forget about when we're feeling so individual all the time. And, we're all going about our individual daily actions. And while I definitely want to go into your thoughts about how we stay in the collective more often, first I would love to hear a little bit about your journey, because you have had quite the interesting and unique career path. But where did it start for you? Or rather than the whole thing, what is the earliest moment in your career path that you remember considering the importance of purpose?
Okay, so I'm going to give you two moments, right? And they're not the moments you're expecting. So the first moment, I'm age 2, I'm in kindergarten. You weren't expecting age 2, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah, so age 2, there I'm in kindergarten, and Mrs. Woodiett, the kindergarten teacher, invites us into the kitchen, and there's paper laid all out on the floor, and there's paint, and there's paper to paint. And I remember dipping my hands into this paint, and it just being this extraordinary feeling, and then creating something with my hands. And even though I wasn't consciously aware of it, I can now see that was the first moment I fell in love with the idea of painting, of creating, that you can actually create something. So there I was, age 2, 2.5, whatever it was, and I'm creating. And I know this is deep down, I know this is what I'm born to do. This is part of my journey. Then age 16, like I'm painting, I'm creating. This is what I want to do. I want to go to art college. I want to study art. I want to become an artist. And yet society doesn't really support that. Like, you know, the most famous TED talk in the world by Mr. Ken Robinson, Schools Kill Creativity. He actually died a couple of weeks ago, very sadly. Schools don't kill creativity. Actually, and that wasn't his title. He was given that title by TED. So schools don't kill creativity, but they suppress creativity. You can't kill creativity. Creativity is an innate gift that we all have access to. And I can talk a little bit more about how do you access it or re-access it. So age 16, my dad comes to me. I've just painted the best painting I've ever painted. And he comes to me and said, I've talked to your mother and I've talked to your art teacher, and we've come to the conclusion that you're never going to make money as a professional artist. So here's a 16-year-old boy, right, who desperately wants to be an artist. And I knew that without my dad's support, or I believed without my dad's support, that I wouldn't be able to do it. So my dreams are dashed. And that really shaped my entire career, shaped my entire life. That single moment, it was the worst moment, because what then followed was a descent into depression. So the reason I know the relationship between all these things is because I then went and studied business at university. And in the first year, I had an eating problem because I was living in a false body, and like I was living a false world, and I had a form of bulimia. Like the only way I could eat was if I got drunk. So I'd go out at night, every single night, get drunk, have a pizza at 2 o'clock in the morning, wake up the following day, the body felt terrible, couldn't eat. Really vicious cycle. And I drank so much that I ended up in hospital twice. The impact of that then was the doctor said, you can't drink. So the one thing that I was using in order to get food into my body, to relax my body enough, I can't do it. So now I'm stuck. He says, like, stop drinking. So the vicious cycle gets worse. And it then leads to depression. That then leads to me not being in a relationship, or in a relationship for 5 years. And then my first job I thought I wanted to do, marketing for Unilever. Like that was a dream job when I came out of university. And after 2 years, they said, sorry, we're going to have to let you go. And the reason they gave me was, you're not creative enough. Go figure. Here's a guy who, age 16, wanted to be an artist. And I'd shut down. I literally gone from this world where I was kind of connected to everything, and I'd gone and suppressed it and crushed it down to this world. And that was my reality.
Wow. What then? what happened then?
Well, I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but it's much easier to fall off the mountain than get back up the mountain.
Yeah.
Actually, I went up and down the same mountain, like this, what I call the false mountain, like the what I call the outer game, false kind of masculine mountain, where you resource self and climb back up the mountain again, because that's going to lead to success. And I climbed it once more, and I fell off it again, and then I climbed it again, and I fell off it again. And then there was a pivotal moment, and I was, by this time, I was actually running my own communications agency in Geneva. I left the UK, I was now living in Geneva, just over there, and I was working on all the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, including sanitation. So I'm working on how entrepreneurs can invest in sanitation, because you can make money out of sanitation. believe it or not. And governments will never invest because it's too expensive. So you can make money out of human waste. So I'm working on this, and there's a moment where I realized that I've built another false mountain. Like I think I've built this amazing life. I have my own home, car, I run an agency, I'm working on all these things that I think I love. And we developed this campaign, and I developed it with the former creative director of Saatchi & Saatchi, like, the number one agency, and this was the guy who made it the number one agency. And we developed this campaign, and we went, here's the campaign. And he'd gone way overboard, like over delivered. And it was this incredible campaign, which actually would have made a difference in the world. And the UN representative came back and said to us, sorry, we can't pay you. What do you mean you can't pay me? Can't pay us? This is an amazing campaign. He said, well, you haven't delivered a poster. And in the RFP, it says you need to deliver a poster. And if you don't deliver that, then we can't tick the box. And if we can't tick the box, we can't pay you. I'm like, hold on a minute. We've delivered a campaign that is going to impact millions of people. 50% of the world's disease is caused by poor sanitation. It impacts equality, it impacts education, it impacts all of these things. And you're telling me that we haven't delivered a poster and so you can't pay us for the campaign? You're crazy. This campaign will work. Like, no, you haven't delivered this, and this is actually what we're going to run. Right. Did you not get the campaign? And at that point, I realized that I climbed another mountain and I could not deliver what I needed to deliver through the UN. And I realized the problem was not a bureaucracy, it was not a process problem. I mean, this took me a long time to work out. It was not a culture problem. I mean, it was, but it was actually a mindset problem. And how do you shift mindset? Well, the world outside us reflects the world inside us. And whatever energy you put out is whatever energy you get back. And this is what I started to learn painting in the mountains, which is what I was doing in parallel. And so I began to see that the solution, the only way we would realize the SDGs, the global goals, was not by focusing on the goals, not by doing something, but by becoming somebody. And if you look at everybody who's ever changed the world, I mean, Gandhi said, be the change you want to do. He didn't say the change or do the change or think the change. He said, be the change, become the change. And that was a pretty pivotal moment. And in fact, there's a statue of him in Geneva, and I think the quote is even underneath it. Maybe I've made that up. I know there's a statue. And that, like, you know, Gandhi, Mandela, any master, like Buddha, Jesus, what attracted people to them was not what they said and not what they did. It was who they became. The energy behind it is what changed the world, influenced the change. And when I got that insight, I realized that I couldn't continue to do what I was doing because communications is an external thing. And that then led me on the path of trying to work out how you could unlock the inner, the essence, unlock creativity. And I first of all experienced that doing painting around the world in extreme locations, which I can talk about. But then I deconstructed the process and worked out how I could help other people to do exactly the same thing. And that's where purpose came into the equation.
Wow. Wow, what a journey. And I so resonate with that idea of being the change, like being the person who you need to be in order for the world to change, right? And I think that this like growing into ourselves is something that we are doing every day, consciously or unconsciously. And when we choose to do it consciously, it's all that much more powerful, right? So I would love to know extreme painting. Tell us about this. like that's first of all like very like as a header that is attractive. That's like what is that? So I would love to hear from you. What is extreme painting and kind of what drew you to it? What is it that it lights up for you?
I mean, I didn't realize this was where I was going to end going, and extreme painting was the name I gave it afterwards, after the experiences. So let me just give you one example of something that happened, and you'll perhaps understand a bit more. So I went out one day and I went with a friend actually, and there's a video of this video on this online, which I can share. A guy called Tony, amazing guy, and we went out and there was snow on the ground. Now, I painted in -10 degrees in Russia, so snow on the ground was not a problem. So I set up and started to paint, and then it started to snow. Now, I don't expect you've painted in the snow, but if you have, what starts to happen, I'll tell you, is that the paint starts to run. So there I am, I'm putting paint on the canvas, and the paint is running. I don't have control over the canvas. And at this point, my ego kicks in, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Tony's filming me. I have no control. What am I doing? And at that moment, I stopped resisting. Like, I became aware that I was resisting. And in the moment I became aware I was resisting the snow, I stopped resisting the snow. And I started to observe something extraordinary. As the snow got heavier, it was starting to mix with the paint. I was still painting. And the snow got so heavy that at one point I couldn't see the palette. I couldn't see the canvas. So I'm purely painting now with my intuition. And then there's a shot to camera where I always just say, and who's painting? Who is painting? Me? The snow? Or something greater than me? And as I continued to paint, something extraordinary was happening. Like, the patterns being created on the canvas were just phenomenal. And we got all the way to the end of the painting. And it was just an extraordinary experience of creating something. And then right at the end, Tony goes, is the painting finished? And I go, yeah, it is. And exactly that moment, the sun comes out and it melts the snow, which is holding the paint to the canvas, and the paint runs off. So I start the painting with a blank canvas and I end the painting with a blank canvas. And the only thing I have to tell this, like to share this, is the story and the video. Wow. But what is the point of the story? What's the real power? Well, the snow, or you could say the universe, in the form of the snow, partnered with me for a certain moment in time. Because in the moment I stopped resisting it, it stopped resisting me. When it stops resisting me, I connect to it, whatever it is. Doesn't matter what you call it, you become it. If you become it, in that moment, you see how you influence it, how you shape it, how you change it, how it is you. Not the small you, not the ego you, but the real you, the essence of you. And in that moment, everything shifts, because you realize not only are you doing it in the moment you become aware of it, you're actually doing it in the moment you're not aware of it. So you're actually influencing it just by being who you are, not aligned with being who you are. And that just blew my mind. I was like, oh my God. So the only thing I need to do is be me. And how do I know I'm being me? Well, I love what I do. So if I'm loving what I do, then I'm being me and not being an cripple, which are creating depression, disease, inequality, COVID, whatever, right? And it was such a simple realization. I mean, it didn't happen immediately that I painted the piece. It took me many years to be able to understand that. To start with, I was crazy. But what and this wasn't the only moment. It happened again and again and again. And what I started to see was the influence of a thought, even the seed of a thought, like pre the thought. So the impulse before it even becomes a thought, the influence that the impulse has on all that is. And it's the moment between it being an impulse, like an energy, and the thought, that's where it gets polluted and it creates all of these things that we're now trying to address. That's the advanced course I've just given you, right? By the way, that's the whole book in like, I didn't mention the book, but that's the whole book I've written in 5 minutes.
Wow. And we will definitely get into the book because we definitely want everyone to know about that. But before we get into the book, I hear so much, and I think you've almost answered the question without knowing what the question was. But I want to get into, like, for you, what you see as the link between creativity and purpose. Because I know for you personally, those two things are almost the same word. But I also know that for you, they're both part of a process through which other people discover their purpose. So I'd love for you to go into, what is the connection or the link between creativity and purpose for you?
Great question. I love the question. So